Black Genius Boy solves $100 million problem that embarrasses white CEO. This is the story of a young black man named Ethan Carter, the son of a cleaning lady who accidentally discovered a critical flaw in the technology system of Silvercore Corporation. Ethan immediately fixed the issue, but CEO James Hartford did everything he could to insult and belittle him. Yet from that very moment of being underestimated, Ethan stunned the entire world. Ethan Carter never imagined that delivering food to Silvercore, one of the most prestigious tech corporations in the country, would change his life forever. At 19, Ethan was the proud but weary son of Mary Carter, a cleaning lady who had quietly served at Silvercore for over a decade. The weight of poverty and prejudice had shaped Ethan into someone who noticed everything, especially the flaws hidden in plain sight. It was late afternoon when Ethan stepped into the Silvercore lobby, carrying a bag of food in his left hand. Waiting at reception, he couldn't help overhearing tense voices echoing through the open glass doors of the conference room just beyond the desk. Inside the room, engineers frantically argued over screens flashing lines of complex code. Ethan's eyes narrowed instinctively. Though he was merely a delivery boy in their eyes, he understood precisely what he was seeing. Silvercore's famous AI system had a critical error, a costly one. "Excuse me." Ethan spoke up hesitantly to the receptionist, a woman in her late 20s with perfectly styled hair and skeptical eyes. "Those engineers, they're making a huge mistake in their code. They could fix it pretty easily." She glanced up dismissively. "Really, a food delivery kid who codes? That's adorable." She mocked, rolling her eyes and waving him away. But Ethan remained rooted to the spot, eyes fixated on the screen, as though it held him captive. Suddenly the voices from the conference room grew louder, more heated. James Hartford, the CEO himself, stormed out angrily, dressed impeccably in a suit that probably cost more than Ethan's entire year's rent. "What's going on here?" Hartford demanded sharply, noticing Ethan's curious gaze. "Who is this?" "Just the delivery guy," the receptionist explained quickly. "Claims he knows programming better than your team." Hartford's eyes narrowed his face, betraying clear contempt. "Is that right?" He stepped forward, arms crossed, scrutinizing Ethan from head to toe. "All right, genius. Enlighten us. What's this massive error you think you've spotted?" Every word dripped with sarcasm, daring Ethan to embarrass himself further. But Ethan steadied his breath, met Hartford's gaze firmly, and spoke clearly, calmly. "Your AI's search algorithm is performing linear iterations when it should be utilizing a hashed indexing structure. It's why your servers are crashing every 100,000 queries. You're losing millions because of something that can be fixed in a few minutes." Absolute silence filled the lobby. The receptionist exchanged stunned glances with nearby employees, while Hartford's expression twisted into a disdainful sneer. "You honestly expect me to believe a 19-year-old delivery boy can fix what our best engineers couldn't solve for months? Do you have any idea how many PhDs we have working on this?" "I don't doubt their degrees, sir," Ethan replied carefully, choosing each word, his voice even. "But sometimes perspective matters more than qualifications." Hartford laughed sharply, harshly. "Fine," he snapped. "If you're so confident, I'll give you exactly 5 minutes. Fail, and not only will you leave immediately, but I'll personally ensure your mother never sets foot in this building again." At the mention of his mother, Ethan felt his blood run cold. Anger flickered through him, but he kept his voice steady, channeling Mary's quiet strength. "Then you'd better start timing now." Ignoring the sneering faces around him, Ethan calmly approached the nearby computer terminal. He pushed aside his fears, focusing solely on the code on screen. In his mind, the complexity unraveled effortlessly, a product of countless nights spent studying alone, absorbing technical manuals, and practicing code until sunrise, all unseen by a world that consistently underestimated him. As Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard, whispers spread rapidly. A small crowd gathered, watching incredulously. Hartford glanced impatiently at his Rolex, clearly expecting Ethan to humiliate himself. 2 minutes left. Hartford mocked loudly. "Better hurry, pizza boy." But Ethan didn't hear the taunt anymore. His mind raced, eyes locked on the screen, meticulously restructuring the flawed algorithm. Lines of bloated, inefficient code disappeared, replaced with streamlined, precise instructions. Seconds ticked down. Ethan finally stepped back, looking directly at Hartford. "Run your queries now." A reluctant engineer obeyed. The screen lit up with activity numbers cascading rapidly. The AI processed hundreds of thousands of queries instantly. No crashes, no errors. Only stunned silence. Hartford stood frozen, mouth agape, fury and disbelief raging in his eyes. "You just saved Silvercore millions," whispered an engineer behind Ethan, genuinely awed. Ethan simply nodded, turning slowly to face Hartford, whose fists clenched in silent humiliation. "I believe my 5 minutes are up," Ethan said softly, voice echoing in the hushed lobby. "But next time you judge someone, Mr. Hartford, remember that genius doesn't wear suits. Sometimes it delivers your lunch." The entire lobby watched breathless as Ethan calmly picked up his delivery bag, leaving Hartford paralyzed with rage. They knew deep down they'd just witnessed something extraordinary, though none fully grasped yet just how dramatically the tables were about to turn. As Ethan walked away from the stunned silence of Silvercore's lobby, he felt the weight of every stare pressing into his back. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, not from fear, but from a quiet fury born of humiliation. Yet beneath the anger, a strange calm settled over him. For the first time in his life, he had stood up against someone like Hartford, someone who always believed wealth gave him the right to belittle anyone beneath his notice. That evening, Ethan entered their small apartment quietly, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside him. Mary Carter was preparing dinner, the fatigue from a decade of manual labor etched into the gentle lines of her face. She looked up instantly, recognizing something was wrong. "Ethan, what's happened?" He hesitated, then sighed deeply, recounting everything: Hartford's challenge, the public humiliation, and finally, his own shocking success. Mary listened silently, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and sorrow. When Ethan finished, her hands trembled slightly as she sat down. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered softly, "I hoped you'd never have to face him like this." "Mom, he's been doing this kind of thing for years," Ethan replied firmly. "Why didn't you ever say something?" Mary sighed heavily, eyes distant. After a pause, she stood and quietly opened a worn-out drawer beneath the TV stand, removing an old shoebox battered from years of hiding secrets. She placed it gently on the table. "All these years I've seen things, Ethan. Heard things. They treated me as invisible, never once imagining I could understand what they were saying." Her voice cracked slightly. "But I kept quiet because I had you to protect." Ethan carefully opened the box. His eyes widened at the contents inside: contracts, receipts, handwritten notes, and even photographs. Evidence of illicit deals, discriminatory firings, tax fraud, and explicit violations of company ethics. Hartford's signature appeared clearly across many documents. "You've been collecting this?" Ethan asked, stunned. Mary nodded solemnly. "Every night when I cleaned, they'd leave these papers around like garbage. They never thought someone like me could understand their importance. But I knew one day they'd matter." Ethan's resolve hardened his earlier humiliation, transforming into determination. "Mom, this is exactly what we need. Hartford won't stop unless we expose him." Mary placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, eyes reflecting a strength Ethan had admired all his life. "Be careful, Ethan. Hartford is dangerous. Men like him will do anything to keep their secrets." The next morning, Ethan received an unexpected call from a man named Mike Dawson, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. "I saw your video confronting Hartford," Mike explained quickly. "It's gone viral overnight. I'd like to meet." They met discreetly at a small cafe downtown. Mike was around 50 with sharp eyes and a calm, yet intense demeanor. "I've investigated Hartford quietly for 2 years." Mike began showing Ethan a thick dossier filled with investigative notes. "But I could never secure enough solid evidence. Your video gave us an opening. Hartford's been panicking all night." "How can I help?" Ethan asked cautiously. "Your mother's position inside the company gives us something we've lacked access," Mike explained. "With what she's collected, we can finally hold Hartford accountable." For the next several nights, Ethan, Mary, and Mike meticulously organized every piece of evidence. Each document strengthened their case against Hartford, painting a portrait of a corrupt man hiding behind power and wealth. Ethan realized his own experience at Silvercore wasn't isolated. It was part of a systematic culture of prejudice and exploitation orchestrated by Hartford himself. However, their activities soon drew attention. Hartford had hired a private investigator desperate to uncover anything compromising about Ethan and Mary. Ethan noticed unfamiliar figures lurking outside their apartment, their stares cold and invasive. One evening, returning from a quick grocery run, Ethan felt someone following him. Quickening his pace, he ducked into an alley, heart pounding. The footsteps behind him abruptly stopped, then retreated. Ethan exhaled sharply, anger flaring again. Hartford was now directly threatening their safety. At home, Mary shook her head gravely. "He's scared, Ethan. He knows we're close. But the closer we get, the more dangerous he'll become. Then we can't stop now," Ethan insisted firmly. "Hartford thinks he can bully us into silence. We have to push back even harder." Days later, Hartford held a televised press conference clearly trying to control the narrative. He publicly accused Ethan of stealing sensitive company information, casting himself as the victim. Ethan watched fists clenched in silent fury. Hartford had underestimated him again, trying to twist reality to bury the truth beneath layers of deceit. When the broadcast ended, Mike called immediately. "Hartford just handed us exactly what we needed," he said confidently. "By accusing you publicly, he's given us the stage to confront him openly. Now, it's your turn to strike." Ethan paused, taking a deep breath. All the humiliations he'd suffered, all the struggles he and his mother endured, now converged into a single, unshakable resolve. Hartford's arrogance would become his undoing. "Set it up," Ethan said firmly. "Let's finish this." As he ended the call, Ethan glanced at Mary. Her eyes shone with pride and worry, but also a powerful determination. "Remember, Ethan," she whispered softly, placing a hand gently against his face. "You're fighting for more than yourself now. You're fighting for every person Hartford thought he could crush beneath his heel." "I know, Mom," Ethan replied, embracing her tightly. "That's exactly why I can't lose." The night before Ethan's planned confrontation with Hartford's sleep evaded him entirely. Every moment of humiliation he'd endured replayed relentlessly in his mind, fueling a resolve sharper than ever. He knew Hartford wouldn't hesitate to crush him publicly, but Ethan no longer feared the man he understood him too clearly. Hartford's arrogance was precisely his greatest weakness. Morning came, and Ethan dressed quietly, his heart pounding not from fear, but anticipation. Mary stood silently by the door, eyes filled with pride, tempered by worry. She placed her gentle hands on his shoulders, looking directly into his eyes. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice calm but unyielding, "remember, you don't have to become someone else to defeat Hartford. The truth itself is powerful enough." He nodded, absorbing her quiet strength. "I promise, Mom, I'll make this right not just for us, but for everyone he's hurt." Arriving at Silvercore felt surreal. The building, filled with memories of humiliation, now seemed poised for redemption. Ethan met Mike Dawson in the lobby, the journalist nodding reassuringly. Together they entered the large conference hall, already filled with press board members and top-level employees. Cameras flashed as Ethan stepped in. Murmurs rose, a buzz of anticipation rippling through the crowd. At the head of the table sat Hartford, impeccably dressed, his eyes radiating arrogance, mixed with thinly disguised contempt. He rose slowly, his voice resonating with artificial sincerity. "Ladies and gentlemen, today, we confront a severe betrayal of trust within our company, Hartford declared solemnly. Ethan Carter, a former delivery boy, attempted to sabotage Silvercore by stealing confidential information. He stands here today, exposed as proof that we must remain vigilant against those who wish us harm. A chill descended over Ethan's anger, simmering beneath his outward composure. Mike gently nudged his shoulder, a quiet gesture, reminding Ethan that now was his moment. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward, the room instantly silent, as all eyes fixed upon him. He locked his gaze directly onto Hartford's voice, steady and clear. "Mr. Hartford, you speak boldly of betrayal. Yet the only betrayal here is your own, against the employees, the shareholders, and the very values you claim to uphold." Hartford's face flushed red. "You dare lecture me? You're nothing but a thief looking for attention." Ethan calmly reached for his tablet, projecting clear images onto the conference screens, undeniable evidence of Hartford's misconduct. Contracts falsified to evade taxes, emails explicitly ordering discriminatory firings, photographs of secret meetings with competitors. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Hartford froze, momentarily speechless, as disbelief and outrage flooded the room. Ethan didn't relent. "You see, Mr. Hartford, you made the mistake of treating people like objects you could discard. You never noticed the invisible eyes watching you, people you considered too insignificant to matter, like my mother, Mary Carter." He clicked the tablet again. Now a recorded audio filled the hall. Hartford's unmistakable voice echoing, "Make sure none of our minority hires move up. Their liabilities dead weight. Keep them low out of sight." The crowd erupted in shock. Board members exchanged horrified glances. Journalists frantically took notes. Hartford, now visibly trembling with rage, shouted, "That's fabricated! I won't tolerate these lies." Ethan stepped closer, his voice gaining strength and clarity. "These aren't lies. They're your own words. You thought no one was listening, but my mother heard everything. Every careless conversation, every ugly secret you left unguarded." Hartford slammed his hand violently on the table. "Enough security, get him out of here now." Yet nobody moved. Even the security guards hesitated, conflicted eyes darting nervously around the room. Ethan looked Hartford straight in the eyes, no fear left within him. "You believe wealth makes you untouchable. You think people like me are powerless. But true power isn't measured in dollars or positions. It's measured by integrity and courage, qualities you abandoned long ago." Hartford's composure shattered completely. In a fit of uncontrolled rage, he screamed openly, "You think you can challenge me? You're nothing, a worthless delivery boy from the slums. Your mother cleans floors because that's all she'll ever be good for." The room fell into stunned silence. Cameras captured every hateful word. Ethan held Hartford's gaze calmly, feeling pity more than anger. The CEO had exposed his true self more brutally than Ethan ever could. Quietly, Ethan spoke again, every word deliberate. "You just showed everyone exactly who you are. A coward hiding behind power. But your reign ends today." Suddenly, the conference doors swung open. Federal agents entered swiftly, badges displayed. The lead agent spoke clearly, directly to Hartford. "James Hartford, you are under arrest for fraud, tax evasion, industrial espionage, and violations of federal anti-discrimination laws." Hartford panicked and, disoriented, shouted desperately as the cuffs snapped around his wrists. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I'll destroy you all." His words faded as agents swiftly escorted him from the hall. For a long moment, nobody spoke, processing the reality of what they'd witnessed. Slowly, an elderly board member stood, addressing Ethan with visible respect. "Mr. Carter, Silvercore owes you a profound apology. And perhaps much more than that. Would you consider guiding us forward as our new CEO?" Gasps filled the room again. Ethan felt overwhelmed, but stayed composed. He knew this offer meant far more than personal gain. It symbolized change, justice, and redemption. "I'll accept," he replied firmly, looking around the room, his voice steady with quiet confidence. but only under one condition: that this company finally becomes a place where everyone is valued, regardless of background or position. Applause erupted spontaneously, journalists snapping pictures of the young man who'd just toppled an empire of deceit. Ethan stood quietly, feeling Mary's unseen presence beside him, her silent strength supporting every step he took. Outside the conference hall, Mary stood, tears streaming down her cheeks, pride radiating from every fiber of her being. When Ethan stepped outside to greet her, she embraced him tightly. "You did it, Ethan," she whispered softly, voice trembling. "You stood tall, and you won with dignity." Holding her close, Ethan finally felt the weight lift, the weight of years of struggle, invisibility, and humiliation. Today, he'd rewritten not just their story, but the story of every person like them whose worth had always been overlooked. In the days following Hartford's dramatic downfall, Ethan felt the entire world shifting beneath his feet. Silvercore's towering headquarters, once a symbol of arrogance and intimidation, now buzzed with a newfound energy. Ethan Carter, the 19-year-old son of a cleaning lady, had become CEO, a fact both thrilling and surreal. But amid the celebrations and media frenzy, Ethan remained grounded. He knew that becoming CEO wasn't merely a triumph, it was a responsibility. Sitting alone in his new office late one evening, surrounded by reports and restructuring plans, Ethan stared thoughtfully at the city skyline, knowing the true work had only just begun. The door gently opened, breaking Ethan's contemplation. Mary stepped inside quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Ethan, smiling gently. "You know," she said softly, "I always imagined you in a place like this, but actually seeing it, it's hard to believe." Ethan smiled back, taking a comforting sip. "It still feels strange. But this office, this title isn't why I'm here. It's about making things right." Mary nodded thoughtfully, taking a seat across from him. "I trust you, Ethan. But remember, Hartford wasn't the only problem. There's still a culture here that allowed his behavior to go unchecked." He exhaled deeply, fully aware of the task ahead. "I know. That's why I asked Mike Dawson to come tomorrow. We need someone from outside to help us clean this mess completely." The following day, Mike arrived promptly. Sitting together, the three reviewed every document Mary had secretly gathered over the years. As they sifted through the evidence, Ethan realized the full extent of Silvercore's internal corruption, overpriced contracts awarded to shell companies, discriminatory hiring practices, widespread embezzlement. The scale of Hartford's misdeeds was astonishing. Mike leaned back heavily, shaking his head. "Ethan, what you've uncovered goes beyond Hartford. Many executives were complicit. This scandal could bury the company if we're not careful." Ethan frowned, resolute. "Then we won't let it. The people responsible must face consequences. But Silvercore employs thousands of honest people who deserve better leadership. We won't destroy it. We'll fix it." Mike nodded in agreement, impressed by Ethan's clear-sighted maturity. "Then, you'll need allies, trustworthy executives willing to help rebuild. People here respect you, Ethan, but they'll also watch your every move." Mary spoke up gently. "Then, let them watch. Ethan's integrity is exactly what Silvercore needs." Over the next few weeks, Ethan met personally with each department. Many employees, initially wary of the young, inexperienced CEO, quickly warmed to Ethan's honesty and genuine care. He listened carefully to their concerns, implemented clear anti-discrimination policies, established transparent hiring practices, and immediately raised salaries for overlooked support staff. Slowly, morale shifted. Employees no longer whispered doubts, but openly voiced support. Ethan's story, once a viral sensation, now became a living example of meaningful change. But not everyone embraced Ethan's reforms. A small group of Hartford loyalists, executives who thrived under the previous regime, began quietly sabotaging Ethan's initiatives, leaking damaging misinformation to the media, and organizing secret meetings aimed at undermining him. One afternoon, Ethan received a troubling anonymous tip. It warned of a clandestine gathering taking place that night, a meeting designed explicitly to destabilize his position. "Should we inform security?" Mary asked anxiously when Ethan shared the news. "No," Ethan replied decisively. "I'll handle this myself. If we don't confront them directly, they'll keep operating in the shadows." That evening, Ethan arrived unannounced at the dimly lit boardroom. Inside, the conspirators froze their whispered plots, abruptly silenced by his unexpected appearance. Ethan scanned the room, calmly recognizing faces he'd trusted, people who'd publicly pledged loyalty only days earlier. "Please don't stop on my account," Ethan said evenly, stepping inside and closing the door firmly behind him. "I'd love to hear how you plan to betray the company." The room filled with tension. A senior executive named Thomas Reeve, Hartford's closest former advisor, stood slowly defiant but wary. "This isn't personal, Ethan," Reeve insisted coldly. "We simply don't trust a 19-year-old to run a multi-billion-dollar corporation." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing the insult without flinching. "And yet, Mr. Reeve, this 19-year-old was capable enough to uncover years of your own complicity in fraud and discrimination." Reeve paled noticeably. Around him, nervous glances were exchanged. Ethan's voice hardened slightly, yet remained composed. "When Hartford fell, I gave each of you a chance to change, to help rebuild Silvercore into something we could all be proud of. Instead, you chose betrayal. That choice has consequences." Reeve laughed nervously, attempting bravado. "You're just a kid playing CEO. No one here truly respects you. You're naive if you think your little speech can frighten us." Ethan calmly approached the table, placing down a small recording device. "Respect doesn't come from age, Mr. Reeve. It comes from actions. And tonight, yours have spoken louder than mine ever could." Panic flickered across Reeve's face. "You recorded us." "Every word," Ethan replied steadily. "The board already knows. They're waiting for your resignations tomorrow morning, or security can escort you out tonight. Your choice." The conspirators stood frozen, realizing their error too late. Ethan's quiet strength had once again dismantled arrogance and deceit without compromising his dignity. As he left the stunned executives behind, Ethan felt a familiar sense of calm. He'd fought hard to reach this position, not for himself, but for people like his mother, honest, overlooked employees who deserved a leader who genuinely cared. Returning to his office, Ethan found Mary waiting, worry etched on her face. Seeing his calm expression, she visibly relaxed. "What happened?" she asked softly. "It's done," Ethan replied quietly, exhaustion and relief mixing in his voice. "They won't threaten the company's future again." Mary smiled warmly, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "You continue to surprise me, Ethan Carter. Every day, I see less of the boy I raised and more of the man I always knew you'd become." Ethan embraced her, tightly drawing strength from her presence. He knew challenges remained, but tonight another shadow from Hartford's era had fallen away. Tomorrow they would continue rebuilding, guided by honesty, integrity, and an unwavering belief that everyone, no matter their background, deserved a fair chance. For Ethan Carter, that belief was no longer just an ideal, it had become his purpose, his legacy, and his greatest strength. Ethan's decisive confrontation with Reeve and the other conspirators marked a significant turning point at Silvercore. The whispers in hallways gradually vanished, replaced by open admiration and trust. Ethan's calm, unwavering strength had inspired those around him. Yet he knew the battle was far from over. Transforming the company required more than simply removing corrupt individuals. It required reshaping its very foundation. Weeks passed as Ethan tirelessly implemented reforms, establishing new diversity programs, merit-based promotions, and transparency policies. Employee satisfaction soared, and the media praised Silvercore's rapid transformation under the young CEO's guidance. Yet amid the success, Ethan felt an uneasy sense of unfinished business. James Hartford, though disgraced, had powerful allies still operating quietly outside the company. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling they wouldn't accept defeat easily. His fears were confirmed one chilly evening. Ethan was reviewing quarterly reports when his phone buzzed urgently. Mike Dawson's voice came through immediately tense and urgent. "Ethan, we have a problem," Mike began. "Hartford's defense team just filed a motion to dismiss charges. They're claiming all your evidence was illegally obtained, arguing it was stolen by your mother during her cleaning shifts." Ethan's pulse quickened. Hartford was attempting one final desperate strike, hoping to discredit Ethan and Mary in court. "Do they have any chance?" Ethan asked, voice tight with concern. "Possibly," Mike replied cautiously. "Their lawyers are powerful. Hartford might escape conviction, unless we counter immediately." Ethan hung up, frustration rising within him. Once again, Hartford threatened everything he'd fought to achieve. Mary, noticing his distress, approached, gently placing a calming hand on his shoulder. "Whatever he's doing, Ethan, it won't erase what you've built," she reassured softly. "We haven't come this far just to let Hartford undo it." Ethan looked into her resolute eyes, drawing strength from her unwavering belief. "You're right. But we can't underestimate him again." The following morning, Ethan called an emergency board meeting, detailing Hartford's desperate legal maneuver. Anxiety filled the room as board members debated fiercely, voices raised in alarm. "Can't we just settle quietly?" one senior member suggested timidly. "Dragging this out could harm our reputation." Ethan firmly shook his head, determined. "No, if we compromise now, Hartford's shadow remains over us forever. Our employees, shareholders, and the public deserve the truth fully revealed." He rose calmly, meeting each member's gaze directly. "This company once protected Hartford's corruption because it was easier than confronting it. That ends today. I won't accept half measures or secret settlements, not while I'm CEO." The boardroom fell silent, stunned, but inspired by Ethan's conviction. One by one, they nodded slowly, fully backing his decision to confront Hartford publicly in court. The courtroom buzzed intensely when Ethan arrived, flanked by Mary and Mike Dawson. Hartford sat opposite, his smug arrogance returning as lawyers aggressively argued for dismissal. Ethan remained composed, refusing to give Hartford the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. When the judge finally turned towards Ethan, Hartford's lawyer quickly attacked. "Your Honor, Ethan Carter's mother illegally collected confidential documents during her employment. Any evidence derived from this must be dismissed." Ethan rose slowly, voice clear and unwavering. "My mother did nothing illegal. She didn't search desks or hack computers. She merely saved documents carelessly discarded in trash bins by Hartford and his executives' documents, exposing corruption and criminality." Hartford scoffed loudly from across the room. "Ridiculous! A desperate defense from a desperate young man." Ignoring Hartford's outburst, Ethan continued calmly. "The problem isn't how these documents were obtained. It's what they reveal: fraud, discrimination, theft from employees and shareholders. Mr. Hartford's lawyers haven't once disputed the authenticity of the evidence, only the method of discovery." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the courtroom. Hartford's lawyer hesitated, visibly struggling to counter Ethan's precise logic. "And," Ethan added steadily, turning to address Hartford directly, "for a man who once publicly belittled my mother's job, you now desperately rely on accusing her of criminal genius. Isn't that ironic?" Hartford's face reddened furiously, realizing the trap he'd stumbled into. Ethan's words resonated deeply in the courtroom, highlighting Hartford's hypocrisy for all to see. The judge, impressed by Ethan's sincerity and reasoning, quickly ruled in Silvercore's favor, allowing all evidence into trial. Hartford's motion collapsed spectacularly, leaving him visibly shaken and defeated. As Ethan stepped outside, journalists swarmed, microphones thrust forward. One asked, "Mr. Carter, how do you feel after today's victory?" Ethan paused thoughtfully. "Today wasn't a personal victory," he replied steadily. "It was a victory for truth. Hartford thought he could intimidate us into silence. But we refused to be silent, not just for ourselves, but for everyone he harmed." Another reporter pressed eagerly, "Do you have any message for Hartford?" Ethan glanced at Mary beside him, then answered softly, yet firmly, "Yes, power means nothing if it's built on lies and arrogance. The truth will always catch up." That evening, back at Silvercore, employees spontaneously applauded as Ethan entered. Gratitude shone clearly in their eyes, pride radiating from their smiles. Ethan felt humbled by their support. This was the real reason he fought so hard: to create a company worthy of its people. Mary squeezed his hand gently, eyes glistening. "Ethan, you've done what I never imagined possible. You've changed everything." He embraced her warmly. "We did it together, Mom. Without your courage, none of this would exist." Later, alone in his office, Ethan reflected quietly. Hartford's last desperate attack had failed, marking a definitive end to the old regime's lingering threats. The future now truly belonged to Silvercore's new culture: transparent, inclusive, and fair. Yet Ethan knew challenges would remain. Success wasn't permanent. It demanded continuous effort, integrity, and vigilance. But tonight, as he gazed across the transformed headquarters, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Hartford's shadow had finally lifted, replaced by hope, trust, and possibility. And Ethan Carter, a 19-year-old who once delivered lunch unnoticed, now stood confidently at the helm, guiding Silvercore into a brighter, more honorable future. With Hartford's legal threats defeated and Silvercore firmly on the path to redemption, Ethan Carter knew he had reached a critical turning point. Yet he felt no complacency, only an intensified awareness of his responsibilities. The media praised him as a visionary young leader, and employees viewed him as a champion of integrity. Still, Ethan sensed that true transformation required more than just removing corruption. It demanded a complete reshaping of Silvercore's identity and culture. Determined to solidify these changes, Ethan announced a groundbreaking initiative, the Silvercore Innovation Fund, aimed at empowering talented young individuals from diverse backgrounds who had traditionally been overlooked by the tech industry. At the announcement ceremony, reporters eagerly questioned his motives. "Mr. Carter, why establish this fund now with Silvercore recovering from scandal?" asked one reporter skeptically. Ethan met her gaze steadily. "Because companies should not only correct past wrongs, they must actively create opportunities for those who've historically been denied them. This isn't charity. It's investing in talent and potential." His words resonated widely further, establishing Silvercore's new reputation as a beacon of change. Applications poured in each story, reminding Ethan vividly of his own struggle. Reviewing them alongside Mary one evening, he felt deeply moved by the countless narratives echoing their own experiences. Mary gently touched his hand. "Ethan, you've given them hope, something we once barely dared to imagine." He nodded thoughtfully. "I want Silvercore to prove that intelligence and talent aren't limited by background. Everyone deserves a fair chance, Mom." Under Ethan's guidance, Silvercore flourished. The Innovation Fund quickly discovered brilliant minds from humble origins, young programmers, inventors, and engineers, who soon became integral to the company's success. Yet, Ethan remained cautious. He knew the more successful Silvercore became, the greater scrutiny it would face, particularly from critics eager to see him fail. His concerns were realized when troubling rumors began circulating online. Anonymous blogs accused Ethan of nepotism, suggesting he favored applicants who shared his background. Though blatantly false, these accusations spread rapidly, threatening Silvercore's carefully rebuilt reputation. Frustrated but composed, Ethan publicly addressed the allegations head-on in a live-streamed town hall meeting. Standing before the cameras, his voice firm yet earnest, Ethan spoke clearly. "I understand skepticism. It's reasonable given Silvercore's past. But these accusations misunderstand our mission. My personal story isn't about favoritism. It's about creating genuine opportunities for talent regardless of background. Transparency remains our foundation, and we openly invite scrutiny." The sincerity of Ethan's response disarmed critics and reassured supporters. The malicious rumors quickly faded, strengthening rather than weakening public trust. Employees admired his honesty, inspired further by his steady ethical leadership. One evening soon after Ethan received unexpected news. Mike Dawson had discovered James Hartford, though stripped of his power and facing impending trial, was quietly trying to sabotage Silvercore's new partnerships. Hartford had been covertly contacting influential clients, sowing doubts and false allegations about Ethan's capability. Meeting Mike urgently, Ethan listened grimly as the reporter laid out evidence recordings of Hartford privately smearing Silvercore to major investors. "I thought he was finished." Ethan sighed heavily, his frustration evident. "Why won't he just stop?" Mike shook his head knowingly. "Hartford's pride won't allow him to accept defeat. His entire identity depended on power. Now he'll do anything to undermine you." Ethan clenched his fists, determined. "We must end this decisively." 2 days later, Ethan arranged a private meeting with Silvercore's most influential clients. In a carefully orchestrated presentation, he addressed Hartford's attacks, directly presenting concrete proof of Hartford's sabotage attempts. Ethan calmly reassured the room, speaking with measured confidence. "James Hartford's era is over. These desperate acts aren't merely attacks against me. They're attacks on all of us on fairness and honesty. I ask not for blind trust, only for the opportunity to prove through action that Silvercore today is nothing like the Silvercore he once controlled." His transparent and forthright approach immediately restored confidence. Clients publicly affirmed their support, openly rejecting Hartford's manipulations. Ethan had once again successfully countered Hartford's deceit with integrity, reinforcing Silvercore's newfound resilience. That night, returning home exhausted, but relieved, Ethan found Mary waiting quietly, eyes filled with quiet pride. "You never seem to catch a break," she remarked softly, smiling gently. Ethan laughed lightly, fatigue evident, but relieved. "Honestly, Mom, it's not about catching a break anymore. Each challenge Hartford throws at us seems to strengthen what we're building. Maybe in a strange way, he's made us stronger." Mary's eyes softened further, understanding exactly what Ethan meant. "You've grown so much, Ethan, stronger, wiser than I ever imagined. I'm so proud of who you've become." He embraced her tightly, drawing strength from her unwavering presence. Yet, he knew Hartford's trial still loomed ahead, a necessary closure for Silvercore to truly heal. Ethan remained ready, aware that confronting Hartford one final time was inevitable. But he also knew he no longer faced that challenge alone. Silvercore, reborn through honesty, courage, and resilience, stood firmly behind him, ready to fully emerge from Hartford's dark shadow into a future that Ethan himself had envisioned, a future bright, with possibility, dignity, and unbreakable integrity. As the day of Hartford's trial finally arrived, Ethan stood silently in the courthouse hallway, feeling the gravity of the moment settle deeply within him. This was the ultimate confrontation, the closing chapter of a journey filled with struggle, sacrifice, and resilience. Silvercore had emerged transformed, but Ethan knew that only Hartford's conviction would fully dispel the lingering shadows of the past. Mary stood beside him, calm but resolute, her quiet strength grounding Ethan's emotions. "No matter what happens today," she whispered gently, "you've already won, Ethan. You've given hope and justice to so many." Ethan nodded softly, drawing courage from her unwavering support. Entering the courtroom, he saw Hartford seated across the aisle, once arrogant features now strained and weary. When their eyes briefly met, Hartford quickly looked away, a subtle but profound acknowledgement that power had irrevocably shifted. The courtroom filled quickly, media employees and curious onlookers packed tightly into seats. Ethan settled into place beside Mike Dawson and Mary, feeling their collective strength beside him. The judge entered, and the room immediately quieted. The prosecution methodically presented overwhelming evidence against Hartford: recordings of discriminatory directives, fraudulent contracts, witness testimonies from former employees revealing systemic abuse and corruption. Hartford's defense, desperate and disorganized, failed to effectively counter the truth. Then came Ethan's moment. Approaching the stand confidently, he met Hartford's defiant glare calmly. The prosecution questioned him about Silvercore's culture under Hartford, about the moment he uncovered systemic corruption and how Hartford publicly humiliated and threatened him and his mother. "Mr. Carter," the prosecutor asked gently, "did Mr. Hartford ever intimidate you personally?" Ethan's voice remained steady. He tried repeatedly. He believed power gave him immunity, that his wealth made him untouchable. He underestimated that truth and integrity could matter more than influence. Hartford's lawyer rose abruptly, aggressive, and dismissive. "Mr. Carter, isn't your testimony simply personal vengeance against a man who embarrassed you publicly?" Ethan paused calmly, turning to face Hartford directly. "My testimony isn't driven by revenge, but by responsibility." Hartford destroyed lives, broke laws, and fostered a toxic culture where employees felt worthless. "My actions were never about embarrassment or humiliation. They were about justice. They were about giving dignity back to every person Hartford thought he could discard." A murmur of approval rippled through the courtroom. Hartford's jaw tightened visibly, his arrogance no longer masking desperation. The prosecutor continued, clearly addressing Ethan again. "After all you've endured, why continue fighting against someone so powerful?" Ethan glanced towards Mary briefly, then back at the prosecutor, speaking with quiet strength. "Because someone needed to stand up. My mother always taught me integrity and courage matter more than fear or comfort." Hartford believed we were powerless, invisible. Today, this courtroom proves he was wrong. Finally, Hartford himself took the stand, launching into an angry, chaotic defense, accusing Ethan of sabotage and conspiracy. But his words only further exposed his true nature: petty, cruel, and deceitful. When pressed by the prosecutor about documented evidence, Hartford lost control, angrily shouting his innocence and accusing Ethan of ruining his life. "You've destroyed everything I've built." Hartford raged, his composure shattered. "No," Ethan responded firmly, calmly from his seat. "You destroyed yourself by believing you were above everyone and everything." The courtroom fell silent. Hartford, utterly defeated, slumped back into his chair, knowing the truth had finally undeniably surfaced. The jury deliberated briefly, returning quickly with their verdict: guilty on all counts, fraud, discrimination, and corporate sabotage. A profound sense of justice filled the courtroom as Hartford, once powerful and untouchable, was led away by court officers stripped of dignity and freedom. Outside the courthouse, journalists surrounded Ethan eagerly, microphones and cameras thrust forward. One reporter asked excitedly, "Mr. Carter, how do you feel now that Hartford has finally faced justice?" Ethan paused thoughtfully, his voice calm and steady. "Today isn't about personal victory. It's a reminder that justice still matters." Hartford's conviction sends a clear message that power doesn't justify cruelty. Wealth doesn't justify corruption. Everyone deserves dignity, fairness, and respect. Returning to Silvercore that evening, Ethan was greeted by employees lining the entrance, applauding enthusiastically. Gratitude shone clearly in their eyes, loyalty born from witnessing Ethan's unwavering courage. He stood humbled, moved deeply by their support. Mary gently squeezed his hand. "Look around, Ethan. This is your true victory." In the weeks that followed, Silvercore surged forward, its reputation stronger than ever. Ethan's innovation fund blossomed, elevating brilliant minds from all walks of life, symbolizing the very ideals Ethan championed: equality, integrity, opportunity. At the annual company gathering, Ethan addressed the entire Silvercore family. Standing confidently before hundreds, his voice filled with conviction, he spoke passionately. "I was once invisible to men like Hartford. Many of us here were. Today, Silvercore represents something different, not privilege or entitlement, but fairness, dignity, and opportunity. Together, we've built more than a successful company. We've built hope." The room erupted in applause, pride radiating from every face. Ethan's journey from humble beginnings to celebrated CEO had inspired not just Silvercore, but countless individuals nationwide. Yet Ethan knew true success wasn't defined by titles or wealth. It was measured by the lives uplifted, wrongs righted, and dignity restored. Late that night, sitting quietly with Mary overlooking the city, Ethan reflected softly. When we began this fight, Mom, it felt impossible. But now it feels like we've truly changed something. Mary smiled warmly, her voice gentle yet powerful. We have. But remember, Ethan, your story isn't just yours now. It belongs to every person who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or treated as invisible. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, fully understanding her words. I know. And that's exactly why I'll keep fighting to ensure this journey doesn't end with us. Together, they sat quietly, beneath the gentle glow of city lights, reflecting not on struggles, but triumphs. Not on past humiliation, but future possibilities. Ethan Carter, the once invisible son of a cleaning lady, had transformed not only Silvercore, but the lives of countless others through courage, integrity, and an unyielding belief in fairness. Hartford's shadow was gone forever, replaced now by a legacy of justice, hope, and enduring change. Proof that power born from integrity outlasts every lie, every threat, every prejudice. Ethan had not simply defeated a powerful adversary. He had reclaimed dignity and purpose for everyone who had ever felt voiceless. And as Ethan looked forward, he knew one truth remained clear. Above all, justice was not an end, but a beginning.